Good afternoon and welcome to OMS's Being My Own Boss, Redefining Career Paths event as part of the month-long series of programs celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. My name is Dave Brown and I'm the coordinator slash office manager of these programs and for the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs at VCU. I've been with VCU for 17 years and in my current role for almost 6. And I use he, him, his pronouns. Today's special guest is Cita Sadeli, also known as Miss Chelove. Did I have that right? Chelove?
Miss Chelove, yeah, like okay. Chelove.
Okay, yeah. Chelove, thank you. I've heard it pronounced so many different times over the years. So, who is an independent Washington, D.C. based art director, muralist, designer, and illustrator. And she's the former co-founder of art and interactive agency Protein Media based in Washington, D.C. and Brooklyn, New York between 2000 and 2013. Cita's creative output is informed by her multicultural background rooted in the tropical mysticism of Java, Indonesia, and formative years growing up in the punk, go-go, and graffiti-fueled streets of 80s to 90s Washington, D.C. Currently, Cita's practice is focused on mural projects throughout the world. When not scaling walls, she collaborates with communities and clients such as several major museums within the Smithsonian Institution, National Museum for Women in the Arts, the Phillips Collection, Apple, Adobe, the Afropunk and Trilectro music festivals, Patagonia, and Pizza. So welcome, Cita. We can dive right into the questions if you're ready.
Sure, thanks for having me. First of all, it's an honor to be here and share with the students.
Awesome. We're gonna be doing your presentation about halfway through if that works for you.
Yep.
Or if you want to do it at the beginning, it's up to you. And if anybody has any questions during the program, Cita will actually be sticking around for a Q&A afterwards. So, all right, so we'll get started here. Since your artistic roots are in graffiti, who were some of the artists that inspired you to pick up a spray can for the first time?
Yeah, so it's like anything else, you know, the first time you see something that really hits you viscerally, you're like, wow, like, what is that? So I grew up in a suburb of Washington, D.C., maybe I don't know, 10 minutes outside the Northeast D.C. line in a city called Hyattsville, which is where Dave is from as well. You know, we would travel as kids in and out of the city along Route 1, which had several pieces, graffiti pieces, and I didn't know what they were, but you know, going up and down this corridor so many times, as soon as I did see it, it really just captivated me. The letter forms, the color, the scale, you know, I was so intrigued as to who created this. Soon thereafter, in my the counselor's office at Northwestern High School, there was a Say No to Drugs pamphlet, and it was you know, kind of a landscape orientation. So it opened up with this big long leaf of paper, perfect for writing graffiti. So they had commissioned Zephyr, who's one of the, you know, the grandfathers of graffiti from New York City, to create visualizations of certain phrases using his wild style letters. And it was just like this, basically like a catalog of letters that you could copy and learn the structures from. So that was really a key moment in my history with graffiti and really understanding. It was before the internet, you know, it was before Instagram. You had to really dig to find things. So finding that was really great. That kicked off my, you know, the practice of studying the letter forms and understanding just how these things flowed. I took it from there to, you know, jean jackets and airbrush and t-shirts. And I was like creating, you know, my own versions of those letters. And from there, it just took off to walls, but I'm sure we'll get into that. But Zephyr from New York was the first artist I was really exposed to.
Great. At what point did you make the jump from illegal graffiti to trying to actually make a living as a muralist?
So there's a lot of stuff that happened in between, a lot. I started working at the local art store, Pearl Art and Craft, just after the Corcoran. I went to the Corcoran for a School of Art in downtown DC for my foundation year. And then I dropped out to begin working. So that was it for my formal education. I went through, freelance career as an illustrator, and then learned how to basically jumped on the computer. I didn't know what I was doing, but I kind of fibbed and said that I did know how to use a computer. Got a job at a web development firm where my friends were working, and they just shoved us in a server room, and I was just working out. Like, they're like, okay, this is how you do this is how you do that, you do that. And so basically there's a big tech, creative tech career that was sandwiched in between the graffiti and the murals. So 10 years, I don't do any artwork at all, like traditional artwork with paints or anything like that. I'm strictly, really just learning all of the technical stuff, graphic design. There's everything that you could do creatively on the computer, 2D animation, programming, front end, back end, everything. So in 2011, I got my first invitation to create a large scale mural through the Murals DC program, which is this DC's mural arts program. They're supported by the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities and facilitated by Department of Public Works. So that was a really great opportunity. Words Beats and Life is the local hip hop nonprofit that's still in existence that was, sort of managing those projects and being sort of the back end with the artist getting the production done. So that was a really great experience. The mural is still there. It's in Adams Morgan. It's called Every Day I See Something New. You'll see it in the presentation, but that's when it all kicked off in 2011. And I've been pretty much doing that ever since.
Since you did come up in the DC graffiti scene, what do you think has made that scene stand out from so many other scenes?
I think if you look at the culture of DC, we're the nation's capital, if there's so many political actions that happen here, people coming from all over the world for lobbying, protesting, social activism, just gathering and building as communities in the hopes of making change and making their voices known. And I think that spirit, along with, because art blends into that very intimately. Back in the day, well, even now, but I mean, the flyer culture was very important for, music and for actions and protests and actions and protests that were music festivals in the 80s, especially, and going forward. But, even now you have these really intricate art builds where artists are creating props and environments and installations for different political actions. So there's a very strong intersectionality between those things. If you take DC's history with music, homegrown music like DC punk rock, which is world famous, bands like Fugazi and Minor Threat and the Bad Brains, all having roots here, and that sort of do-it-yourself ethic that comes with that. It's just scrappy and, go-go music, you can't forget that. That along with also some other subcultures that are really related, the skating scene here, the skateboarding scene, Freedom Plaza, how people kind of congregate and how the music and the art and the graffiti kind of overlaps in these spaces. It's really interesting. You're literally a block from the White House and you've got, go-go bands playing while really some of the world's best skaters are like skating, and then there's but they're also doing graffiti. That there's graffiti artists and they're like rocking on black books, basically drawing in black sketchbooks. It's just interesting how it all kind of folds together. But I think that's what makes our scene unique, is this sort of blending of so many different, really strong subcultures that feed into each other.
Great. Let's see. Since we were talking about kind of, your transition from graffiti to murals, what do you think the biggest misconception, misconception you think people have about graffiti and street art?
Well, it's interesting. It's I think kind of a reach for me to try to imagine what it's like seeing that for the first time. But I think something that could be common with folks is like not understanding how deep of a culture these things come from, how much work, how many hours go into practice, like learning that craft and understanding how, even just taking graffiti, there's a system to it, and there's grandmasters, and then people that you look up to and can learn from that are just masters of this style, letter forms and space and composition and color balance, like so many different theory, principles of art making and creation that aren't really formalized in the traditional way. So it's and there's rules to it, like even more so than in street art. Street art is much more loose, and it just deals with people really creating art in the street. Graffiti is a completely different thing. Yeah, there's just a lot more structure to that, and what is I guess what an ethic, well, talking about ethics and graffiti is a little interesting because there's a lot about I guess sort of destruction of property, and anyway, it's a mixed bag. But I think in short, what people don't understand is just how deep the roots of these cultures are, and how much work it takes to put into these things, and what kind of conversations are happening as you're viewing these things on the street. What kind of politics might there be about, street art doesn't go in this space. This is only for, graffiti artists on a rooftop, for example. Anything that goes up there is going to get gone over, but like over here, and then there's like sanctioned murals in legal spots. And then there's, a restaurant owner that might want something on their wall in their exterior. So there's different classifications of space and how you move through that space. And, it's unfortunate for people who aren't from that area because they don't understand what's what, and they might not even be thinking about it in that way.
Great. You've been hired for many different mural projects, from public alleyways, which we already spoke on, to larger corporate buildings. How do these mainstream companies tend to find you? And what is it like dealing with these, much more mainstream, bigger companies?
Yeah, I mean, for someone that does public art, every piece is a calling card. Every piece is an advertisement. So in that way, you're really, it's easier on you for your marketing efforts and budget, because you kind of don't have to do that, especially with, the usage of Instagram and how folks are really interested in the work and take a lot of, selfies in front of the work. And then it just starts to populate itself in terms of a culture around this piece, and maybe around that space that the piece is in, which is just like you create it and it just takes off. I mean, it's kind of like this strange birth where you give birth to this baby and it just starts living this life. But yeah, what's interesting is, some of the challenges that you'll face when you're dealing with, like a larger company or corporate project is there's just more stakeholders. There's more voices involved. There might be more of an interest in the control of the content of what you're painting, which is interesting by contrast, because sometimes the smallest project has, that one person that just never happy with anything. It's just like rounds and rounds of iterations. And, so it's kind of a luck of the draw in that respect. But one thing that I really like is you can set up your schedule. The schedule for mural artists, especially in the warmer months, is crazy. And people are always dropping things on you at the last minute. Every industry has it, like, oh, this is happening next week. And you're like, why are you just telling me this right now? But a lot of these bigger projects are just a lot more, they have more of a lead time. So you'll hear about something in a year and a half, and you can properly plan for it, you properly, plan your life around it. And it's just, I like that aspect of that, of those types of projects.
With dealing with these bigger companies, how much creative control do they tend to give you compared to like a smaller, more independent company?
I think it depends, and what you can leverage as you move through your career is like the more work you have under your belt. And strangely, if there's that one project that just really makes you look like you're the boss, like it's like a great location, or just, it's interesting what that will do and how you're viewed, and sort of the amount of creative freedom that folks will give you, because you're sort of like, I guess they feel like you're more certified in a way as a creative. So that's an interesting thing to watch too. But yeah, it's, generally, what I'll ask is, what themes are required for a project. And if it's about baseball or something like that, maybe something that doesn't interest me or doesn't like resonate with the work that I'm doing. So I'll automatically be able to kind of navigate my way through offers in that way.
Without obviously naming names, have you ever actually turned down a project because you didn't want to work with that company, and why?
Yeah, I think, there are certain things that happen, when you're first starting out, you might be, a little bit more desperate for work and you'll just take what you can get. But, I remember one time, being offered, to build a website for like a chicken farm, and I'm a vegetarian. So there's like conflict of interest where like I just couldn't feel good participating in that. No judgment of anyone or anything, but just it wasn't something that made me feel good. So there's this sort of visceral reaction. Someone said, this is a common phrase, I guess a lot of people say this, but if it's not a hell yes, it should be a no. And that's a really good, once you get past that, like you're just starting out and you need all of the jobs that come your way because you need to survive. Once you get past that hump, it's a really good test to just navigate again through the offers, because every project you create, it's building towards the direction that you're headed in. And if you're going to do that chicken farm website, it's going to bring you more poultry and you know what I mean, more, maybe more farms, it's going to lead you in that direction. So it's really important to kind of stay on course and doing some, soul searching to ask yourself, like do some brand identity, research with yourself, like, hey, what is my mission? What do I want to say? What excites me? And then just sort of track in that way.
Cool. Kind of following up with that, like, since you do come, you do have your origins within the punk scene as well, and with that self work ethic that you touched on a little bit, do you think that helped you weather the uncertainty of the pandemic rather than like looking into maybe taking that chicken farm website job with like the less amount of jobs happening?
I think, the life of a creative, can be feast or famine, but, pandemic or not. But I think what helps me really stick with, a heavy schedule and always being busy is really just my immigrant background and how hard my mom, is a single mom with 4 kids from another country, English is their second language, no family here to help raise the kids. Seeing her with 3 jobs, it really imprinted on me this understanding that like, if there's opportunity, and definitely if you have need, like you've got to just make it happen. And so I think that, along with the, the DIY ethic that, we grew up with in this scene, it's just made me I have a, very, very intense grit, like I'm here to do the thing. And I'm just very focused on that. And interestingly enough, through the pandemic, I had no slowdowns. And it's probably because painters were considered essential workers, I guess, through the construction industry, which were essential workers. So I had no slow ups at all. Fortunately, I can't say the same for the service industry. I mean, those folks just got slammed. All my friends that were like event photographers and DJs, like they were crying, so luck of the draw again.
Do you want to do your presentation now, just since we're at a good like midway point of like your past going into your future?
Sure. Let's see. Share my screen. Okay, 1 second. All right. Let me see if, I'm going to do a small test. Can you folks see this when I full screen?
I see everything, including our window on the right, which I don't think actually appears on the final video.
Okay. Okay, so if that looks okay, I'll proceed.
Okay.
Okay. So again, my name is Cita Sadeli. My artist's name is Miss Chelove, and I'm an art director, muralist, and designer. This is in front of a mural from 2017 in Shirlington, in a restaurant. But it's a nice, it's a nice piece that's actually stuck around. So what I'm going to do is flip through some of my work, and just explain a couple points about sort of what inspires me, the nature of my work, what I like to speak about, followed with ending with a couple of projects that I've just completed. So this is, and I'll go a little bit briskly because I have a few slides to get through. So this one is on Hotel Zena. It's in Washington, D.C. at Thomas Circle. And it's on the outside of a hotel that's sort of dedicated to celebrating women and the power of the woman. So all of the art pieces inside, this is where that RGB piece is that's created out of tampons that are like dipped in. It's kind of like a light bright or like a pointillism kind of a piece. When I was creating this piece, the pandemic actually was just taking place. This is March 2020. And midway through the project, the city closed down. So I just gradually saw this traffic circle just drain of people. And as the city just became completely deserted, really. A couple more shots. They wanted two warrior women, sort of theme. So this is the treatment that I came up with. A couple more production shots. They're really large scale, as you can see with me with the small paintbrush there, but shot from inside the basket. This basket is where I spend a lot of time. I just spent 5 weeks in a basket like this, the man lift, the boom lift. So that's a little interesting because you're out in the middle of like the atmosphere and the air, but you're so restricted so you can't move around. It's kind of wild. This is another mural I created in the Columbia Heights neighborhood on the outside of a community health clinic. So very welcoming, bright colors. It's meant to just play on psychology of people that might be visiting a place like that, maybe not feeling so great. Maybe it'll uplift them and change their day a bit. This is another large scale mural in DC along the bike trail. It touches on Japanese No theater, spelled N-O-H, and sort of urban scene with kids on bikes and the freedom that you feel doing so. A little close up showing you the scale. My mom's name is always in the piece too, so you see it there. Annie, it's in the bike. It's a little shout out to her. This is the same piece I mentioned. It's called Amazon Love Letter in the sort of back wall of this restaurant. Another piece that honors the water protector. So it's thinking about this notion of protection and maybe figures you might see on a city street, and the sort of nobility that comes with being in a challenging environment and maintaining your sense of power and identity and personal agency. It touches on the local lotus fields that we have in DC at the aquatic gardens. It also touches on the fight to maintain clean water for really everyone, but especially around indigenous populations in the United States. This is across from a daycare center in DC. So it's meant to reflect those children and their energy. Pretty cool piece. This is a couple, I won't go into too much of the details. This is on a music venue in DC, and pizza inside their restaurant. Use of a lot of metallics. It's in Chinatown. A few pieces from Miami. I did an artist residency there, along with it was actually a Muslim centered or Islamic centered residency, and the other two women that were in that residency. One is a B-girl, a dancer. She does a lot of like popping and locking. She's from Chicago, named Amira Sackett, and then another wonderful musician named Asia Black, who's in the Reminders, who's also Muslim. I'm not Muslim, but my whole family is. I'm from Java, Indonesia, and I'll go into that a little bit more. another early piece from DC, a couple of interiors. I like to work in a lot of botanicals. On the left, we see touches from Javanese culture, which is, again, where my mom's from. Mexican restaurant in DC. Love to explore different cultures, textures, patterns, textiles, things like that. The work takes you around the world as well. This is in a residency in Karachi, Pakistan, and we had just completed a workshop around wheat pasting, which is a really cool kind of street art technique. A lot of women there. They were feeling very empowered. It was very cool energy. Some more shots from that residency. This is from a residency in Colombia, working with refugees from the war, and some refugees from Venezuela as well. So these new populations of folks that have been displaced. Some portrait workshops and other things. We had painted these murals. There were like a dance number that they did. It was very enriching. How are we doing? I'm gonna zoom through this, Dave. I'm gonna zoom through this really fast. Okay, so one of the themes that I like to work into my murals is, what happened in this place, right? Are there any stories that I can tell? Is there any, are there any people of note, that we can, latch onto a story and represent in this public art? This is the first mural that I did, the one that I mentioned in Adams Morgan. This is the wall prior to me ideating and coming up with any approach to it on the side of a house. And it directly faces an elementary school. So I thought about what they could see every day and not get tired of. So I thought about, what makes Adams Morgan Adams Morgan. So this is the design concept I came up with. And it has a phrase in it: every day I see something new, and that's supposed to kind of emerge as the kids see it. For the adults, there's a lot of things that make sense, about Malcolm X Park, and we got the dancers and drummers, the drummer circle there, and all of these little like sort of cultural touch points that are based around music, nature, local restaurants, things like that. So this is a view from the during production. You can see the lift there. Is the view from the school, the elementary school. A few in-process photos, and then the final. And then, it's interesting, like I said, the murals become entities unto themselves. People are filming their wedding pictures there. It's it's just kind of wild and humbling and amazing that would happen really quickly. So in summer 2020, we had the uprising for social justice and around racial inequality. And there was just so many things happening. DC became kind of a center for that. We all remember the Black Lives Matter street mural. It was the first in the series that, went across the world. Basically, people started to replicate this, sort of street mural thing. But this was really a big middle finger to Donald Trump, is, created to be seen as he was flying his helicopter over 16th Street. So I thought that was amazing. Here we have the Xena mural. Protests would come right in and out of that space in that circle. So it was just really interesting seeing, and the city was, helicopters everywhere. There were actual cars burning in the street in downtown DC. Like it was pretty wild. So these are some of the, and Pizza is a local company that had a campaign that wanted to utilize their boarded up shops, because a lot of shops were boarded up because of the protests. So those became canvases, and a lot of regular average folks just came out and started painting. It was really beautiful. This was one of the contributions that I made for that. So a little bit about that, my roots, my culture, Java, here we have it, it's amazing, it's the fruits, the carvings, the detail and the creative, expression that you see everywhere is like in my blood. And that's my mom there in the bottom center, and in the upper right, who came here in 1965. So I find that this creative energy is still in my blood, and anyone listening to this who's from somewhere else, and it's a great thing to reach into, to pull out when you're looking for what you want to express, or maybe touch points of like ancestors and the way they did things, and how that's in your DNA and just ready to express itself. I was talking about the DC in the 80s, and the punk rock scene, the graffiti scene, and how alive everything was. And these are just some scenes and some flyers from that era. Me taking the pilgrimage to 106th and Park Avenue in East Harlem. There's the Graffiti Hall of Fame. So, all of these sort of, cultural experiences rolled into one. They really still fuel me to this day. Here's some of the music-based work that I've created for Afropunk, and Trelectro was a big music festival here in the mid-aughts, I guess, 2015 and beyond. Another theme I like to focus on is representing resilient women of color. My mom was one. I consider myself one, and I really like to see those images being circulated everywhere in public. Just a couple. This is a really great friend of mine, Jamila Okubo, who's also a very celebrated young artist from DC, who's just a gem of a human being. But I needed a muse for this mural, and she became that. A piece from Miami, another one from Noma, a couple other pieces exploring Ethiopian culture. That was actually for Starbucks, but it got turned down because it was too ethnic. Anyway, so here's a couple of other ones just around town in DC. Various mix of some Miami, Annapolis, International Hip Hop, Women's Hip Hop Festival in Belgium that I attended, which is amazing. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so I'm ending on these two. This is a new project that's currently hanging, if anyone's in DC, on the National Museum of Women in the Arts Western facade. And it's like, basically they commissioned me to create this piece. Let me stop talking, I should show you the artwork. They commissioned me to create this piece and did not give me any thematic guidelines or requirements. And so I chose to speak about, it's called Receded, a forest floor flow. And it's about, my culture, where I'm from. Think about my mom, moving from Java, Indonesia to the United States, being reseeded, having to kind of like recreate your life. I thought about the theme connecting to COVID and us sort of coming out of that, and what have we learned, and how can we maybe encourage some post-traumatic growth, because it has been traumatic for everyone in a lot of different ways. And what does that mean? Who can we be now that we're recreating ourselves after, somewhat of a shattering in a lot of ways. Anyway, so those were some of the themes that I was touching on in this piece. It was amazing to see it being hung. It's huge. Here's some large scale pictures. I mean, look at the construction, guys. It's like so big. It was pretty cool to see. I just completed this mural in Shaw, DC. It's right in downtown, and it's across the street from the Shaw Library. It was for a very small 2-project women's mural project supported by the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. And it consists of 6 portraits of inspiring and strong women. Most of them I know. So it was cool to sort of surprise them with this. You can see the scale here of the face. This is Sinu Hetep. She's on the right. She's an amazing human, but really skilled yogi, and sort of a very centered spiritual person. And Mama Sari is in the top there. She's from Baltimore, and she does a lot of work to feed the community and provide affordable food for everyone. So, and there we have my mom's name again. It's always there. But yeah, so I've just come off of that, and I will stop the screen share because I am done, and we can get back to the chat.
Great.
I hope that was quick enough. I tried.
Oh no, if anything, I wanted to say slow down, but you were going. Okay. So okay. Like how much of the stuff that you posted photos of is still actually up? Like how many of those things?
Everything except for the unfortunately La Puerta Verde, which is where the Mexican themed, there's actually 3 murals in there. COVID took them out. They were a really good restaurant, but they just didn't survive. And I still have to contact the owner to see, like, did you take the art down? Like, does it still exist, or did it like?
That's what I was going to ask. Like, peel that wall off. Like, put it somewhere. Put it somewhere else.
I mean, that's why you need to get good high-res photos of your work, not with an iPhone. You got to get like a DSLR, because anything can happen. Even if it's graffiti piece, like it might only be up for one night. So.
Okay, so um, talking about how busy you are, this falls into this question here. How do you maintain a healthy work-life balance while having a career that is definitely not a 9 to 5 job?
Well, anyone that's an entrepreneur knows that it does not stop. Like, and you really have to create good boundaries. I have not been able to do that yet, but I'm working on it. Because, unlike having your own small business with a team, you feel supported. Like there's someone even to be like, are you feeling stressed right now? Because I'm feeling stressed. And then, hearing them affirm that is so important. But when you're working, even you're a solopreneur, like there's no one to talk to. So that can be really challenging, even in trying to uh, keep tabs on what is actually happening in the moment, because you have to handle everything. And anyone that's worked in an agency knows that there's, if you're working on a campaign, there's a team of 10 people working on that campaign. Someone's managing the client, somebody's handling the money, somebody's handling the creative, the ideation of the global idea, and then there's all these people making it happen. Like that's just you, like doing everything, and then you're paying your taxes and dealing with your personal life. Like it's a lot. And then like a pandemic happens and it's like, it's just so much. But so what I try to do is as much as I can, I don't do it enough, but really meet up with other creatives and other muralists. And it's like this, like, like I'm home. Like they understand exactly what my challenges are. Oh God, I got this 150-foot boom lift that I had to drive and I didn't really understand how to do that, and they're like, oh yeah, it's just these, connection points really help. That helps me stay healthy. But anyone that's had a health challenge, you really, the way our healthcare system is here, and dealing with systemic healthcare issues that you might have they're stemming from stress. I mean, there's myriad of different health conditions that stem from stress, right? So if you're trying to drill down, like, okay, why do I have this thing? You have to go all the way down into like, how stressed are you in life? And we're all stressed. So I went through this thing where it was a big educational journey on, healing and how to heal myself. And being out in nature is a big thing. We're on these screens all the time, and there's a lot of uh, hot tech, radiation that's coming out of these machines, the blue light with our eyes. There's so many things that we're putting our bodies through. And simply by being away from that and being in nature, and even having like a digital sabbatical, where you're taking Saturdays, my phone is like at home, which is, when's the last time you purposefully left your phone at home? Like it's wild. But these little things, meditating, journaling, those are all, in terms of like the great thinkers, and spiritual leaders and business leaders, simply walking, journaling, meditation, learning like proper breath work. Like these are all really basic and free things that you can do to help just maintain your sense of health. There's deeper things you can do. You can do like, Epsom flotation chambers, and which I've done. And one of my friends really swears by those, because apparently you can get like the equivalent of 8 hours worth of sleep in like an hour or something crazy like that. But anyway, I could go on about that, and I won't bore you with that. But yeah, there's a lot that you can do to remain healthy, but you have to first be curious about it, and do some self-analysis. Like, am I healthy? Am I feeling okay? Or maybe not. So okay, let me explore ways to bolster that.
Um, so as a minority with your industry, what have been some of the challenges that you've faced and how do you work to overcome them?
It's interesting, because I haven't noticed it. I mean, there's definitely like gender equity things that I read about. Would I know that they were happening to me? Probably not. Like if I'm a muralist up for a position on a project and the budget's 40,000, it's 40,000 for everyone. So that's one cool thing in terms of equity. But a minority, I haven't noticed anything with that at all. And even these days, it might work, in your favor, because, folks are trying to be more inclusive, and, maybe, not to say it in a crass way, but there's like a checkbox that needs to get checked off. And that's just the way things work. Like, it's not really personal. Like, oh, you just picked me because I'm a woman. And, like, okay, well, great. Folks are trying to make things more equal. So I'll check that box gladly, and I'll do a great job. And we won't worry about that framework. We'll just worry about like the work that was done, which is what we should really be focusing on.
Awesome. What are some industry changes, speaking of the industry again, industry changes in regards to diversity, equity, inclusion that you hope to see in the future?
That one was so hard because it's so systemic. I was just like, oh my gosh. I actually want to like do more reading about what can happen there. I think, for anyone running productions, it's a double-edged sword, because just like what I said, you have a project, you want to hire the best person for the project regardless. But, there's still, for me on my productions, I really strive to hire all women, if I can, especially if it's a, women themed mural. And I think it's important to do what I can, and people of color. So those are the little things that I do. And I see companies doing this too. But yeah, it's a big question. And I'd like to dig into that a little more.
We could be here for hours talking about it. I totally get that. So since you've been doing this for quite a while, and multi-decades at this point, what advice would you give to your younger self, and what would you like your legacy to be?
Yeah. Yeah, the advice I think would just, it touches on what I was talking about before about choosing to not work alone all the time in isolation. Building that community, checking in with them. And I think people, a lot more, conscious, pockets of community are already good at this. Like, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing right now? Is there any, do you have bandwidth for, a check-in or like a tea together? Like, do you need to talk, and just checking on people, I think creates that culture of people checking in on you. And that's really helpful. And something that advice I would have given to myself back in the day, just to help you feel better about all of the highs and lows that you have to take, and the intense stress that comes with this job, and being like a solopreneur or an independent person doing anything. There's a lot of stress that comes with that, and a lot of uncertainty, especially if you don't have people to check in with. Mentors are really important. I've never had one. I still want one. When is it too late to have a mentor? Is it ever too late? Because I need a couple, yeah, just trying to figure everything out yourself. And it might come from how we grew up, Dave, like if just no internet, got to just find the solutions yourself. Like, I'm not really used to getting a download from somebody, but it just makes it go so much quicker, and your career will go so much faster. And if you're not just like reinventing the wheel, because there's no glory in that. Like, don't do that. No. But the legacy, I'd be happy to have any legacy really, but like maybe just somebody that opened hearts and lifted spirits with their work, and really created like a visceral reaction. It sounds so like simple, but like just makes people happy and smile and feel better about life in general. Maybe like reframes their thinking and puts it back on something that's more real, yeah, I'd be happy with that.
So I know that it's just started screening recently, but there's a documentary short film about you that's making the rounds now. How did that actually come about, and how does it feel to have a movie made about you?
Yeah, so it's really flattering. It's a 15-minute short, so it's not like a full, feature length thing, but I'm sure that if it was that long, the producer director, Sarah Gama, she would have done a great job at it. But she reached out to me. She's actually an old friend of one of my older sisters. I'm the youngest of four. And she was in an academic media training program known as the Muslim Women in Media Institute. And So the aim of that program is to train emerging journalists and documentarians in the authentic representation of women from Muslim backgrounds in American and Western media. So its goal is to challenge the cliches in the media, to share diverse stories so that American audiences learn more about the multiplicity of voices and experiences amongst Muslims in America, which is really important, especially coming out of 9/11 and just like all of that chaos that came out of that, with folks from the Middle East and, Muslim folks and, just, I think that's a really important thing. So yeah, she approached me and asked me if I had any projects coming up. Unfortunately, I didn't have any big outdoor ones because that would have been really cool. But the one that was coming up was a Indonesian coffee shop that's owned by two Javanese people who actually worked with my mom at the Voice of America. So it felt like, home, it felt like friends, and it just felt really good. So she sort of, we go into the story of my roots and my mom's story through the lens of me creating this mural at this coffee shop. So it's very intimate and creates a lot and offers a lot of sort of peeks at DC. There was some media that was shared by some local filmmakers and photographers from like the 80s. So there's some 80s and 90s. So there's some cool like historical footage in there as well. And yeah, it's screening like in a couple of days. Actually, tomorrow's the first screening in Baltimore, and there's a couple more through the weekend. And it'll be available online for a 24-hour virtual screening as well. If anyone's interested, they can check my link in my bio. I don't know if they're checking this after this, then maybe it'll be out another time, but it's pretty cool.
Great. This goes back to, we touched on a little bit with advice. If you could pass along one piece of advice to other women wanting to follow in your footsteps, what would it be?
I think like definitely, and this is a kind of a no-brainer, but you just always have to be ready to work really hard. And, we touch into this like understanding that it takes like there's two tracks. Like if you're a natural at something, I think it's really easy to just kind of excel at that thing. If you're not so much a natural, you can still learn how to master that thing. You think about Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours idea. You have to get there. You have to put in the time, and then all of a sudden you're an expert at it, and that feels pretty good. But it takes time. So don't be afraid of the hard work. Community matters. I've talked about that a lot. Helps you stay strong and centered. Integrity really matters. So, do your job very well. Listen, it's not about your ego. It's about the end result and the end product and the feelings and emotions that you want these people to see after seeing, a visual piece of art, The high road is always the best choice. If there's an issue with the client or anything else, like just always take the high road, and that feeds into the integrity as well. And try to learn how to compartmentalize emotion a little bit, especially as women, we tend to be more emotional because we're more holistic in our thinking and our, taking in of a situation. But learning to sort of cleave that from your approach to dealing with a problem is really beneficial because, as we all know, everything goes awry when you're too emotional. We've all, hit the save button on the draft before sending that email. And it really pays to just like monitor that. And always be willing, once you get to it, like a sort of upper level or expert level at what you're doing, just always be willing to offer help to other people and, serve as a mentor in any way possible, or just to, even with people that are, equal in your skill status or skill level, just sharing information, and that feeds into building community as well.
You had already in your presentation talked about upcoming art projects that you're going to be doing. Was there anything going forward that, like, if somebody wanted to like see one thing and like that you feel like really represents you, what piece would you like them to see and really like take in?
I think the piece Guardians of the Four Directions at Hotel Zena is, I think that's, like I was mentioning before, that's that piece that I just was lucky enough to be offered that job. And it's just in such a beautiful location. Like it's got this beautiful stage. So I think whatever would have been there would have been really great. But I think that's a great environment, and it really serves the piece well, especially when the light hits it. Like we've got this like a light beam that goes straight down Massachusetts Avenue. And it's like the golden hour, just like warms up their faces, and it's just I can't even believe it. I'm like, who made that? Like, how did that happen? But that one's I would pick that one as the top.
Since it's mostly I think it's just my coworkers that are in here at this point. But we actually saw that one during our bus trip because we
Oh,
went around
cool.
that circle. So, and
Yay.
my boss actually caught a quick photo of it. So I know that she's really heavily into that one. So, and it definitely makes sense because it's definitely there and for a lot of people to see on a regular basis. So that was all the questions that I had. But if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to unmute everybody. Let's see if I can do that. I think everybody can unmute themselves. But if you have any questions, you can chime in and Cita will answer them. And if nobody does, then we will wrap up a little early.
Question. So out of like, I know you probably traveled many different places, but were there any like particular places where something may have inspired you or spoke to some of your art?
Every place does it. It's like, oh my gosh, just being in another part of the world and seeing like the similarities, but also, I mean, really the similarities. Like when I went to Brussels, I wasn't expecting to see so many people of color. I was like, oh my God, like this is amazing. Like it's almost like home. I don't know. It's really, really you can find inspiration everywhere, because I think you're just excited to be somewhere else. And that kind of makes you more like ramped up. And then your eyes are seeking more like material to take in.
Right. Yeah.
It's like going to a party with like all these people from all over the world. And you're like, ooh, like listen to all these accents. Like even just that, you're like, it tizzles you.
I love the whole collaborative and working together with people. So I definitely understand exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, if any of you would like to see more of Cita's work, her website is www.misschelove, and I'll be adding a link to that when this gets uploaded to YouTube. But if nobody has anything else, I'm happy to, and thank you so much, Cita. This has been so fun. I haven't seen you in, I think, about 30 years. So
I know, that's so weird. You don't look your age, I'll tell you that. You've been eating your olive oil.
Yeah.
Your coconut oil.
Pure luck. So, and I would definitely say the same about you, because when I told people how old I was, and I was like, yeah, and I went to high school with her, and they're just like, wait, what? So you've gotten more people more confused about your age than mine. So that's always nice.
We're cohorts in the confusion category. Well, one thing about my work, my website is so out of date. And I believe the URL is chelove.com, but don't even go there. Go to my Instagram at Miss Chelove, MISSCHELOVE, and you can see all the stuff. And I'm really into stories. So like there's a lot of behind the scenes and really cool stuff in the stories. If you're bored, you can just go through and like they're somewhat categorized. But the Instagram is definitely like the latest and greatest. And it also has a lot of important links in the link in bio. So I'd go.
Well, it's also neat kind of seeing the transition of like, you'll show like, just the initial sketch on the wall, and then you'll show like a third of the way through, and it's like you get to see the whole progress. So it's really neat, like following the stories.
It's good to get that feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps me coming back, because the thing is, it's not just like, hey, here's this one thing finished. It's like seeing the whole process makes it a lot more fun to see, because I think people seeing that will make them appreciate how much work it takes, especially when you see like you're this big and this wall is like, this big. It makes them really like, people always ask me when they see stuff like that, like, well, where do you start? Like at what point on that wall do you go, okay, this is where I'm going to, the first like paint's going to hit the wall.
It's a big question. I mean, the question I even struggle with to this day, like, do you start on the right and go to the left? Like, what are all the facts? Like, it's real. It's a very real question. So